Ever wonder what happens when you step into an abandoned place where silence screams and the walls seem to whisper secrets? This is a true story of one such place, where nothing is as it seems, and everything that happens leaves you questioning your own reality. Brace yourself for a journey into fear. Asterisk credit asterisk. Asterisk story credit asterisk special thanks to Mark Williams for sharing this terrifying experience with us. If you have a spine-chilling story of your own, send it over and it could be featured here next. It was a dark and stormy night when I decided to visit the old, abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. I had heard the rumors about this place, how people had vanished without a trace, how strange noises echoed through the empty halls, and how a sense of dread hung over it like a dark cloud. But despite the warnings, I couldn't resist. I wanted to see it with my own eyes, to experience it for myself. I arrived at the factory just after midnight. The moon was hidden behind a veil of dark clouds, and the air felt thick and heavy. The entrance to the factory was creepy in its own right. The huge, rusted gates were half open, creaking in the wind, as if inviting me inside. I pushed through the gates, my heart beating fast with both excitement and an unexplainable fear. Once inside, the factory was even more terrifying than I had imagined. The walls were covered in dust and mold, and the air smelled like rotting wood and metal. The sound of my footsteps echoed through the empty space, but there were no other sounds, just an unnatural silence that made my skin crawl. As I walked deeper into the factory, I began to notice strange things. The lights flickered, and every now and then I could hear a low growl coming from the darkness. It sounded like someone or something was watching me. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just my imagination, but the sense of unease grew stronger with every passing second. I came across a large, ominous door at the end of the hallway. It was half open, and beyond it was a flight of stairs leading down into the basement. The growl was louder now, and I could feel a cold chill run up my spine. But I had come this far, and I wanted to see what was down there. Against my better judgment, I walked toward the door and descended the stairs. When I reached the basement, I was greeted with a sight that made my blood run cold. The room was filled with old machinery, broken and rusted, but still so massive and imposing that it was hard to believe it had ever been used. But what truly terrified me was the hundreds of scratch marks on the floor and the walls, as if something had been dragged across the room. The air was thick with a foul smell, and there, in the center of the room, was a dark figure standing still. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its eyes locked on me, watching, waiting. My breath quickened, and my legs began to shake. It was as if the whole room was closing on me, and I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I had made a terrible mistake. I turned to run, but the figure moved first, standing in my way. It let out a loud, guttural growl, and the room seemed to spin around me. I felt a sudden weight on my chest, and I could hardly breathe. Every bone in my body screamed for me to get out of there, but I couldn't move. I was trapped, paralyzed with fear. I don't know how long I stood there, but finally, I mustered the strength to turn and run up the stairs. I heard the sound of footsteps behind me, slowly at first, but then picking up speed. The closer I got to the exit, the louder the footsteps became, until it felt like something was right behind me. I slammed open the door and ran out of the factory, never looking back. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of my car. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands were shaking so much that I couldn't even start the engine. When I finally got away, I looked back and saw the factory looming in the distance. It was still there, dark and empty, but now I knew the truth. The factory wasn't abandoned. IT wasn't empty. It was haunted, and it was waiting for me to come back. The end. Ever wonder what it feels like to step into a place where no one dares to go, where the air is thick with fear, and the walls seem to whisper secrets of the past? This is a chilling tale of one brave soul who ventured into an abandoned asylum, not knowing that it would become a nightmarish experience. Asterisk credit asterisk. Asterisk story credit asterisk this eerie tale was submitted by Jessica Brown, who experienced something truly unexplainable in an abandoned asylum she once visited. If you have your own spine-chilling experiences to share, feel free to send them to us. Asterisk main story asterisk. It was a cold and foggy evening when Jessica Brown and her friends decided to explore the long-abandoned Ridgewood Asylum. The place had been empty for decades, but the stories about the tortured souls that once lived there were enough to make anyone hesitant. Despite the warnings from locals, Jessica and her group were determined to uncover the mysteries hidden within the asylum's decaying walls. Armed with nothing but their flashlights, they ventured into the asylum, excitement coursing through their veins. The main entrance was a set of old, rusted gates that creaked as they pushed them open. As they entered, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over them. The building was eerily silent, except for the occasional sound of their footsteps echoing through the long, empty hallways. They made their way through the asylum, the only light coming from their flashlights that barely illuminated the vast, dark spaces. Every room they entered seemed to hold something unusual: old, torn furniture, discarded medical equipment, and strange markings on the walls. But it was in the old ward on the 3rd floor where things began to take a terrifying turn. As Jessica and her friends walked deeper into the ward, the temperature seemed to drop suddenly. The air grew colder with each step, and it felt as if something was watching them from the shadows. Jessica's flashlight flickered before completely dying, leaving her in pitch darkness. Out of nowhere, the silence was broken by a loud bang from the far end of the hall. The group froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. Another bang echoed, followed by the sound of something or someone moving quickly through the hallway. The group tried to run, but they couldn't move. It felt as though invisible forces were holding them back. Jessica, terrified, turned around to see a shadowy figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was tall, thin, and its face was a blur of distorted features. The figure started moving toward them, its footsteps slow but deliberate. Jessica could feel her body shaking in fear, but she couldn't move. As the figure approached, she suddenly heard whispers, soft, desperate voices begging for help, echoing in the walls of the asylum. The shadow moved closer, and just as it was about to reach her, Jessica felt a sharp pain in her chest, like something was pulling at her heart. A strange force yanked her backward, and everything went black. When she awoke, she was outside the asylum, alone, with no memory of how she got there. The only thing she could remember was a chilling sensation of being watched and the whispers that continued to echo in her mind. The asylum had taken something from her, something she couldn't explain. She never returned to the Ridgewood Asylum, and to this day, she feels the weight of those whispers following her. Asterisk. There's an old mansion hidden deep in the woods, abandoned for years, yet still stands untouched by time. Some say it haunted, others claim it's cursed. Whatever it is, the few who dare to venture into its dark halls were never the same again. This is a terrifying tale of what happened when a curious soul decided to uncover the secrets of the mansion. Asterisk credit asterisk. Asterisk story credit asterisk. This horrifying encounter was submitted by David Clark, who, against all warnings, entered the infamous old mansion. His story serves as a chilling reminder that some places are better left alone. It was a chilly October evening when David Clark, a thrill-seeker and avid urban explorer, heard about the infamous mansion hidden deep in the Blackwood Forest. The mansion had been abandoned for over 50 years, but locals whispered that it was cursed, haunted by the spirits of its former inhabitants. But that didn't scare David. He was used to exploring dark places, and had always been curious about the mansion's eerie past. Determined to uncover the truth, David gathered his camera and a flashlight, setting out for the mansion alone. He didn't tell anyone where he was going, as he preferred to explore in silence, capturing every haunting detail for his YouTube channel. The journey to the mansion took hours, with only the sound of crunching leaves beneath his boots as he ventured deeper into the forest. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he arrived. The mansion stood tall and silent, its windows shattered and its exterior covered in vines. The air was thick with a sense of dread, as if the house itself was watching him. But David pushed forward, stepping to the broken gates, which creaked ominously. As he entered the mansion, a sense of unease settled over him. The floorboards groaned under his weight, and dust swirled in the air. His flashlight cast long shadows that seemed to move on their own, and the silence was deafening. David knew he was alone, Yet the feeling of being watched was inescapable. He began exploring the ground floor, taking pictures of the decaying furniture, old portraits, and dusty antiques. But the deeper he went into the house, the more unsettled he became. In the grand dining room, he noticed a large mirror hanging on the wall. As he approached it, something strange caught his eye. For a split second, he thought he saw a figure standing behind him in the reflection. He turned quickly, but there was nothing there. Shaking off the feeling, he continued to the second floor. The stairs creaked under his weight, and as he reached the top, he was greeted by an unbearable coldness. The air was frigid, and his breath formed visible clouds in the dim light. He moved cautiously down the hallway, his footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing the bare wood beneath. When he entered one of the bedrooms, he noticed something odd, a large, old chest sitting in the center of the room. The chest looked untouched, as though it had been waiting for someone to open it. Curiosity got the best of him, and he slowly walked over to it, kneeling to lift the heavy lid. As soon as the chest opened, a horrible, pungent smell filled the room, like rotting flesh mixed with something sour. David recoiled, covering his nose, but before he could close the lid, something caught his eye inside the chest. A pile of old, tattered clothing. But underneath them, something moved. His heart raced as he pulled out a piece of fabric, revealing a mummified hand. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the house. David froze, his blood running cold. The sound came from below, followed by heavy footsteps like something or someone was walking through the halls. He quickly closed the chest, but as he did, he heard a faint whisper, barely audible but unmistakable, "Leave this place." Terrified, David grabbed his camera and ran down the stairs. As he passed through the hallway, he felt something brush against his arm, cold as ice. He didn't stop to look. He just ran faster. The mansion seemed to stretch, the hallways longer, the rooms more twisted. His flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls, making it impossible to see clearly. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, David burst through the front door and ran into the woods, not stopping until he was far away from the mansion. As he sat there, gasping for air, the whispers from the mansion echoed in his mind. David left the forest that night and never returned. But every now and then, he still hears those whispers, and he can't shake the feeling that something followed him from the mansion, something that still watches him from the darkness. There are some places that should never be explored. The house with no doors is one such place. Abandoned for decades, it's said to be cursed. Those who have entered never come back the same, and some never come back at all. What's lurking inside that place? No one knows for sure, but if you ever hear its whisper calling, don't answer. Asterisk credit asterisk. Asterisk story credit asterisk. This bone-chilling account comes from Elena Roberts, who was daring enough to venture into the house, only to find more than she bargained for. Elena Roberts had always been a curious soul, one who found solace in the abandoned and the eerie. A seasoned urban explorer, she'd seen and experienced plenty of creepy places, dilapidated hospitals, forgotten asylums, and houses that time had swallowed. But there was one house, a particular mansion on the outskirts of town, that had always caught her eye. It was a massive, decrepit structure that stood far off the main road, hidden behind a thick veil of trees. Local rumors surrounded the house, claiming that it was cursed, that it was home to malevolent spirits. They said the house had no doors, and the windows were too high to be reached. Some believed that anyone who entered the house was doomed, that it was only a matter of time before they'd disappear without a trace. Of course, Elena didn't believe in such things. To her, it was just another challenge. One afternoon, she decided to visit the house, to see for herself if it was just a myth or if the rumors were true. She arrived at the mansion in the late afternoon, just as the sun began to set. The house, though still standing, looked as though it had been abandoned for centuries. Its brick walls were cracked, the roof caved in, and vines had completely overtaken the exterior. There were no visible doors or windows, just large stone walls with narrow, shadowy cracks where light barely seeped through. Ignoring the chilling atmosphere, Elena stepped onto property. She didn't know what to expect, but something about the house felt wrong, like it was watching her every move. She made her way around the house, searching for an entry point. After what felt like an hour, she discovered an opening, a small crack between two stones that seemed just large enough for her to squeeze through. With her heart pounding in her chest, Elena crawled through the gap and into the house. The moment she stepped inside, she felt a strange pressure in the air, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The inside was dark, too dark for daylight to penetrate, but as her eyes adjusted, she saw the eerie surroundings. The floors creaked beneath her, and the air was thick with dust, but there was something more, something inexplicable. It was as though the house itself had a pulse, a life of its own. She wandered deeper into the mansion, her flashlight illuminating strange, old furniture that seemed to have been untouched for decades. But the deeper she went, the more unsettling the place became. Every room looked identical, and every hallway seemed to loop back into itself. As she turned a corner, Elena found herself in a small, square room with stone walls. She tried to leave but realized that there were no exits, no doors, no windows, just walls. Panic started to set in. She retraced her steps, but no matter how many times she walked the halls, she couldn't find an exit. She was trapped. The room began to close in on her, the walls pressing inward. Her breath quickened as the temperature dropped. Then a low whisper filled the air, soft at first, like a distant murmur, but it grew louder and more urgent, almost as if it was calling her name. Elena, Elena, leave this place now. Frozen with fear, Elena spun around, but there was no one in sight. Her flashlight flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Then the whisper grew louder, clearer. Leave, or become one of us. Terror surged through her. She felt the walls closing in on her, and her vision began to blur. A strange fog filled the room, clouding her mind. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, and just as she thought she couldn't take it any more, the door appeared. It was a heavy wooden door, unlike anything she'd seen before. She rushed toward it, her heart pounding in her chest, and as she threw it open, she found herself back outside. The sun had set completely now, and the mansion stood silent, as though nothing had ever happened. She ran from the property, terrified and shaken to her core. She couldn't explain it, but she knew one thing for sure. That house had tried to keep her. Whatever it was, it didn't want anyone leaving. Elena never spoke about the house again, but those who knew her said she was never quite the same. She stopped exploring abandoned places and became a shadow of the woman she once was. And sometimes, late at night, she would hear the whisper again, a faint voice calling her name from the dark.